Welcome back to the Keto Vegan Podcast. I am Rach, I am your host, and today I'm going to talk about something that affects us all, not keto, not vegan, but it is about the planet. So it doesn't matter whether you are creating your red Thai peanut satay vegan keto curry or sipping a mojito or just trying to live on a planet that isn't slowly turning into one giant rubbish tip. Last week, world leaders gathered in Geneva to finally do something about plastic pollution. 11 days of talks, nearly 200 countries, and the promise of the world's first legally binding treaty to curb plastic waste. Sounds so promising, right? Well, let's unpack what actually happened. From the start, expectations were high. We are drowning in plastic, literally drowning in plastic. Plastic particles are turning up in human blood, in placentas, in the air that we breathe. It's in rivers, it's in oceans, it's in food chains. It is everywhere. Scientists have been warning that without action, plastic production could triple by 2060. This summit was billed as the moment the world would finally agree to turn the tap off. But almost as soon as delegates sat down, the cracks began to show. Countries like Rwanda, Peru, and members of the EU were pushing hard for caps on production. They want change because, let's be honest, you can't keep mopping up the floor if the tap stays on. On the other side, petrochemical giants and their allies, the United States, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Russia, they dug their heels in. They didn't want limits on production. They wanted to focus on recycling and waste management, voluntary measures that sound nice on paper, but ignore the fact that you can't recycle your way out of a plastic tsunami. Day after day after day, the wrangling dragged on. Delegates were exhausted, sessions stretched late into the night, and at one point, talks literally collapsed within minutes of starting because they couldn't even agree what to discuss. It became painfully clear the world's leaders couldn't even get past the first hurdle. This was supposed to be the turning point, the moment of breakthrough. 2 draft treaties were on the table, one ambitious, covering production caps, toxic chemicals, and plastics across their whole life cycle. Another weaker, watered-down version, still at least something to work with. But neither passed. Not one. The US delegation, backed by petro states, flatly refused binding rules. Polluters like Shell and Ineos make billions turning oil and gas into plastic. So they sent an army of lobbyists to the global plastics treaty negotiations to influence dealmakers and block real action on plastic pollution, all to protect their profits. It's like letting tobacco companies write the smoking laws. These polluters should be nowhere near the talks. No caps, no chemical regulation. Their position was clear. They'd handle waste management on their own terms, voluntarily, which is basically the political equivalent of saying, don't worry, I'll tidy up my room eventually, while continuing to chuck pizza boxes out of the window. By the end of the 11 days, there was nothing. No compromise, no agreement, just bitter disappointment. For campaigners, this wasn't just a setback, it was betrayal. The treaty that was meant to be signed later this year in Busan was now in tatters. Geneva was supposed to be the place where the tide turned. Instead, it was where the tide pulled us under. So where does that leave us? Stranded? Not entirely. Some campaigners remind us that international agreements are marathons, they're not sprints. The Montreal Protocol, the treaty that healed the ozone layer, took 8 years of talks before it finally came together. But let's be honest, waiting for consensus isn't going to cut it this time. The way these talks are structured means 1 or 2 countries can block progress for everyone. If that doesn't change, we'll still be arguing over commas while our oceans turn into plastic soup. There are glimmers of another path. Some nations are talking about forming a coalition, a group willing to move ahead with strong measures, leaving obstructionists behind. Colombia has already said it will push forward with its own unilateral laws. China, a major plastics producer, has started acknowledging that the entire life cycle of plastics has to be tackled. If they choose to lead, that could shift the balance dramatically. And then there's us, the everyday choices, the grassroots movements, the pressure we put on our governments and companies. Every time we refuse plastic, every time we demand better policy, we are part of that push. Sign up to the petition from Greenpeace, there's a link below, of course, to stop the lobbyists being part of the negotiations. So yes, Geneva was a disaster. Yes, it's frustrating, but it isn't the end of the story. What happens next depends on whether nations and people like us are willing to keep going, because plastic pollution isn't waiting for anyone, and neither should we. So that's it for today's episode. Geneva may have failed, but the fight against plastics isn't over. It's just moved to a new phase. It's better no treaty than a really weak one. And just like with food, it's the daily choices we make, it's the persistence, and it's the refusal to give up that makes real change. I'll see you next time.